Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go.
How I screwed my lying employer back by not doing anything. 2 years ago, I worked in southern China. I had my own little business after spending a year teaching English, and life was good. I eventually got an offer to teach business at a university. The offer was from a friend/acquaintance whom I knew from doing freelance IT at a local expat bar. I was always there, helping the old business guys work their computers. Anyway, this guy, R, was an academic. And like most expats and academics, he was a drunk. No big deal. I was used to the type. He offered me a job at the university he worked at, BIT, Beijing Institute of Technology. The pay seemed good, class hours were short, only about 2 to 3 classes per day, sometimes less, and it was in a great location. So knowing R as a person I liked and trusted more or less, I started there. Fast forward 2 months. My boss there, Jeff, is a piece of crap. He hasn't told me an honest word since I got there. They loaded me up with 24 classes per week after my first 2 weeks, and they never fixed anything that was broken. We didn't have working internet. At the Beijing Institute of Technology, we didn't have working internet. Jeff, my craphead boss, was told that I was good with computers, so he constantly asked me why I haven't made the internet faster yet. I told him he needs to buy faster internet. I can't just snap my fingers and turn the cord into fiber optic. I sent him emails about the usual stuff, students cheating, no internet, books being illegally printed from the UK curriculum and thus being about UK business law and not Chinese or even international business law. He ignored it all. Eventually, I got in trouble for letting my students out after a final. Yes, my students were supposed to stay in class for another 2 hours after a final. Evidently, it wasn't a legit school, and the students' parents could possibly complain to authorities if they found out their kids weren't in classes that they paid for. The authorities would then come to BIT and shut everything down because of missing business/education licenses. I'd asked Jeff what to do after finals, or if I could just let the students out, but like always, he ignored my emails. Jeff brought me into his office and showed me other emails from another teacher talking about how professional that teacher was for emailing him everything, all in a condescending tone. Because of the course, I made up my mind then and there to get the hell out. Anyway, I'd been there 2 months. My suggestions and ideas had all been ignored. I'd been lied to about how many classes I would have to teach, and my boss is an a-hole. It's also time for me to get a new Chinese visa. Well, the admin there tells me to just go to Hong Kong and get a business visa. 1, teaching under a business visa was illegal. 2, they won't pay for it. 3, I can't do that because my passport has 6 months of validity left, and you can't get new visas when there's just 6 months left. BIT should have known that because they had scans of my passport for the last 2 months, but lazy morons never bothered to check. Now, I knew number 3 was going to happen. I couldn't trust Jeff or BIT, but I could trust them to be incompetent morons who wouldn't actually handle something. I reminded them about multiple times. So, I tell them at BIT, thanks for paying me in advance. In cash, shady, right? But I legally have to leave the country now. Bye. Never went back, never saw them again. To this day, I look back with glee about how I walked out that day with 1 month of extra pay because I legally could not be in China anymore, and those idiots had nobody to blame but themselves. And our second story. Uncle bankrupts his previous employer. My uncle is an Indian doctor. In the 90s, there was a massive doctor shortage in Australia, so the government gave him citizenship. Unfortunately, you still had to sit 3 expensive exams to work as a doctor in Australia. These exams cost thousands of dollars, only happened twice a year, had limited sitting spots/times, and had arbitrary pass-fail marks. So many Indian doctors ended up becoming taxi drivers and small businessmen, etc. My uncle decided instead he would reapply to go through Australian medical school. Sure enough, being a doctor for 10+ years makes medical school easy, and my uncle was top of the class. He decided since he was already pushing 40 and had a family, he would apply to become a GP, family physician, instead of applying to be a surgeon like most of his teachers had suggested. At the time, many desperate foreign doctors were applying for GP residency. They would essentially get treated like crap. They would be forced to work unpaid overtime. They would not be given proper study time or leave to sit mandatory exams. They would pocket the meals, accommodations, study, leave allowances that you were supposed to be paid by the training college. They would roster you to work every Saturday and Sunday shift, and if you refused, they'd give you a bad review and your training would be jeopardized. This mostly happened to foreign doctors, as most of them would be in bad debt and highly desperate for any sort of work. When my uncle graduated, he applied for GP training in a practice that's located within an Indian ethnic enclave so that he would have access to religious food, schools, etc. for the kids. Sure enough, this practice engaged in all of the above effery. My uncle would work every single Saturday shift. During his dedicated study time, he would have to come into work. He got reprimanded for not overcharging patients in line with their framework. Worst of all, when my aunt was really sick and hospitalized, they wouldn't give him any time off to look after her and the kids. The owner of the clinic was a white GP who was openly racist against Indians, Asians, and Aboriginal people, who were a large percentage of the clientele of this clinic. My uncle bided his 3 years, and as soon as his documentation came through making him a GP, he quit that instant. He went down to the local bank and got a loan to open up his own practice. All his old patients quickly moved with him to the new practice. The first year he struggled, but his practice quickly became known and word spread. Surprise, surprise. Foreign-trained doctors actually work well and care about their patients if you actually care about them and give them appropriate wages and living conditions. More patients and more doctors looked to work with my uncle. Within 2 years, my uncle had a GP practice that had 4 doctors, 2 nurses, 2 trainees, and a manager. His practice easily rivaled the original teachers. He then started 2 more GP practices with the money he was pulling in. These practices trapped his old teacher's clinic in a 2-kilometer triangle. He would advertise heavily and make sure he could take as much business from his old teacher as he could. Within 5 years, his old teacher's practice went from hiring 6 doctors, 4 nurses, and 6 trainees to just 1 doctor, his old teacher, and no one else. His old teacher tried to sell up his practice to other doctors, but no one would purchase it, given how successful my uncle's 3 surrounding practices were. He then tried to sell it to my uncle, who refused to buy it even at a ridiculously low sale price. Instead, he waited for the bank to repossess his old teacher's clinic, then purchased it for a bit more money from the bank. My uncle then repurposed the building into his main offices from where he runs the other 3 practices. He made sure to redevelop his old boss's room into staff toilets, just as one final tribute to the human turd that was his old boss. And our last story. Mean lady hates everyone, especially us. We buy her house after she failed to pay her debt. The house we live in was built at the same time as hers. My parents were often at the construction site and help if they could. The strange lady was nice to us at the beginning, but that changed soon. This happened around Christmas 2017. We have a neighbor who's very unpopular in our neighborhood. She's well known for harassing people who use the public path at the left side of her house. The path is one of 3 to reach the public playground behind her house. If someone uses the path, she would scream at them that this is her path and her private property, which is wrong. Sometimes she would close the path with a red and white plastic chain and wouldn't let anybody use the path. She would scream at kids on the playground when they were loud in the daytime. She always has her shutters almost down so she can stalk the people on the street and stay unseen. If some kid's ball would land in her garden, she'd bring it to the kids and destroy it with a knife right in front of them. All kids knew this and would run by her house if they wanted to go to the playground. When the neighbors' kids were playing in the winter outside in the snow, she would call the CPS equivalent in my country and tell them that they were locked outside by their parents as punishment. If someone walked by her house at night, she would often call the police due to a noise complaint. She was known by everyone in our neighborhood as the witch, but she hated my family in particular. We lived right beside her house. Our houses shared one wall. When me and my sister were young, we would use the swing in our garden or jump on our trampoline. She would regularly file noise complaints and often harass me and my sister when we were alone in our garden. If my parents heard her screaming swear words at us from the first floor of her house, they would yell back. If me or my sister walked on the path by her house, she would scream at us. We used the path daily on our way to school. One time when I came home from school, she was in her car with the trunk on the sidewalk. When I walked by the back of her car, she howled the engine and the dark exhaust hit me. Almost every night, she would hit the shared wall with something to wake us up. Sometimes she'd ring our door and try to make us go to other neighbors to complain about small things. We often had lawsuits with her. One time because her trees grew 2 meters over the border. Another time because she built a fence by sticking bamboo mats in the dirt and tearing it down the next day and telling police we destroyed her wooden fence. We won all the lawsuits against her because my uncle, he's teaching law school, gave us good advice on how to deal with her and named lawyers he knew were good. She never paid the workers who repaired things at her house and the electrical and water bills. When her old car broke down, she didn't pay the car mechanic and never got her car back. She was in debt and had a mortgage on the house. When the foreclosure came, we were at the court and bought her house. She was with us in the courtroom when the auction was and tried to buy her own house but wasn't allowed because she couldn't provide proof that she has enough money. We bought her house where she'd lived for 20 plus years right in front of her. We renovated it when she left. We repainted all the rooms, renewed the insulation, put in a new wooden floor. My grandparents will be moving into her old house this fall. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one with more great stories about crazy people.